Mm. All right. Um, so very good to have a chance to be here with you um, on Saturday morning. I wanted to. I've been the last few weeks. I've been looking at this meditation on the like inner energies, or just becoming aware of the buzz or the hum of life, of existing, of sort of being, and that all of our senses are all just really manifestations of being alive, just some access to awareness. So I wanted to switch into an interesting topic. A friend of mine is dying over the actively, and that and it's a perennial topic. I actually wanted to talk about the meaning of life, but kind of stitch these things together, like just the actual experience of life and the meaning of life and how it drives behavior and what are we doing? Just at least reflect on the way I've come to understand that. But as usual, to start by just settling our minds and to begin to have a chance to absorb more inwardly, as usual. So we can find a comfortable position for our meditation. And then just take a deep breath in and out. And then another breath, just inviting ourselves to relax. And another breath, asking ourselves, what is important right now? What is important determines what we pay attention to. So our attention follows our intention, which follows our values and sense of what's important. So for this time, we can direct at least some of our attention, or to the best of our ability, we direct all of our attention inwardly, just becoming aware of our own body on a gross level and our breathing. And within our body, we can gradually become aware that there are so many signs of movement and life. Our breath is just the most obvious of these when we're not moving. But the inner sensations of being alive can include ringing in our ears, buzzing in our skin. We just try to become aware of some of these more subtle signs of our own life, our own existence. even just become aware of these subtle inner sensations means our mind has to quiet down. So, with that quieting of our mind can come an experience of peace. Just become aware of the inner sound in our ears. To do this, we have to be very quiet. Helps draw our attention inwards. can develop some appreciation that this life has come through the kindness of so many others, our parents, family, friends, society, employers. We can develop a warm heart and feeling of gratitude and closeness to those around us. And we can develop a wish to use this brief time here together to increase our good qualities, to be of greater service and benefit to those around us. And then this intention we can arise from our meditation. So, last weekend I was contemplating this conundrum about how to help individuals and organizations figure out what to do next, and make good decisions. And there's one. The 20th century and the 21st century and so forth, all of it's been characterized by all of these exponential growths, exponential growth in the number of humans around the world, the amount of information, access to resources and so forth. And it just seems like everything's growing, exploding, becoming infinitely more complex and so forth. And then the question is, how can we prepare ourselves for a future like that, where there's infinite complexity and everything keeps getting more hard to understand and manage? But in nature, there is no such thing as something that is an exponential system that grows forever. All exponential systems are bounded by something. You have bacteria that grow, but eventually they use all the food and consume all the food, and there's nothing left. And so that slows the rate of growth and so forth. So for us as humans, there is even though all of these online services like Facebook, Twitter, and so forth, they're all growing kind of exponentially. But the Earth has a finite carrying capacity, maybe 10-ish billion people. And our minds have a fairly finite capacity to take in information and make sense of information. And we all have a fairly finite amount of time. And so I was thinking, if you work backwards from our finite number of humans on the planet, right? And they've all somehow got to figure out how to coexist. And each of us has a finite lifespan, assuming it's not going to become radically different. We have a finite ability to take in information. Given all of those constraints, even though it seems like, access to information and change is just exploding, exploding, exploding. If you take all of those constraints and work backwards, you can come, at least from myself, it helped me to come to some more useful conclusions. And one, and I mentioned at the beginning of the class that I have a friend who's in the dying process, and so my wife and I have been discussing more about that whole process of death, and this has been a perennial topic of interest and fascination for me since I was young. Like, what is the actual meaning of life? There's a lot of ways of framing it. Is it worth living or not? I remember someone, I don't know, it was Heidegger or someone, said there's only one true philosophical question, and that is suicide. It's quite a strong statement, but really this question of, like, we are here, what should we do? Why are we here? What's the point? We've got a certain amount of energy. And just even being aware and being alive indicates that there is some, the fact that we're aware, it's not that we think, therefore we are, but we think, therefore clearly there is some energy, some conscious energy going on. And that energy is always going in the background, right? That little buzz, that hum, your heartbeat, your breathing. There's something that gets you up in the morning. There's something that gets you out of bed. And if we do a job, if we go to work, whatever, implicitly, although superficially it looks like we're working for money, there's something deeper going on that motivates us or doesn't motivate us to work and to engage with people and to do everything. So at the root of every action, there is some root underlying motivation, and it differs for all of us. We all have our own sort of portfolio of things that we value. Quiet and peace, action and adventure, companionship, being left alone, fame, anonymity, and it varies over time, and it's all sort of self-contradictory. But one of the big questions that arises is when we talk about the meaning of life. It's interesting, just even the term. Normally, there's a difference between sounds that have meaning and sounds that don't have meaning. So words are sounds that convey a meaning. And to convey a meaning means to transfer information between two minds. So if I say a word, a nonsense word, kwashikwar, something like that, conveys no meaning, right? Conveys no information. And so at least the way I was taught in the Buddhist tradition is that, words are kind of sacred in a sense. They're kind of magical. Words are an amazing technology that humans have access to, the ability to make a vocalization, create some sound that conveys information between two minds. But even this question about what is the meaning of this inner sound, right? What is the meaning of this buzz, this hum, right? Of our own life. If we think about our own life as being relatively brief, anyone looking back on their life will say it's gone super fast, right? The years and the decades, they speed up. There's some sort of acceleration effect that happens. nowadays for me, weeks just go like whoop, 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 like a second, it feels like. And months, years, and so forth. These things are flipping by, right? So there's this question about, okay, um, I'm definitely going to die. I'm definitely going to run out of life. This is um, a friend of mine in his 60s was saying to me the other day, um, contrasting himself and me, and saying, oh, to be in my 40s and have infinite energy. Now, I don't feel like I have infinite energy, but I'm sure everything's kind of relative. And he has so we have energy, we have life, we have time at the moment, but it is a finite resource. It's like the population of the earth and so forth. All these things are finite, they're consumed. And so then the question is, what happens then? What happens after we died? Was there a meaning? Was there a purpose? And so forth. And so this is a deep and challenging question. This is the fundamental, philosophical question. Meaning of life. It sounds so trite that makes me a bit nervous to broach the subject, but it is fundamentally extremely important. And I think we have an instinctive way of dealing with this problem already, right? So, among other things, the desire for sex, which is to one degree or another, we're all sexual beings, with all these variations on that and what that looks like. But we are produced from sex. Just to tell you the truth about what happened with your parents, and their parents and their parents and so forth. And it's an instinctive underlying part of our mind. It describes how we form, pair bonding and all this kind of stuff. So sex is one answer, right? Create children, and then your children are your legacy, right? Now your children are also pain, and your children also ignore you, and no, okay, so good. But they may not be the only legacy that we want to leave, right? And so then we want to leave a legacy through our work, right? And so we're motivated to, be a notable scientist or a writer or something like that. But we'll leave an impact on our society, make a lot of money and have an endowment. But all of these things that we do, right? Whether it's like my mom creating a garden, and I really feel like she invests that as like her legacy. And there's some sense of like, one way or another, we're creating something that is communicating something wonderful. And that's a very natural thing for us to do as living creatures. Just like trees create pollen, humans create ideas and relationships, interactions, and so forth. But we have deep underlying assumptions about what are our options for leaving a legacy, and what does it mean to leave a legacy? Like, what are the constraints by which we can leave some legacy? And it's interesting. Again, I guess just because I'm trained in the Buddhist tradition, one of the main maybe the main defining characteristic of monks and nuns, that word monk from mono means single. It's the original bachelors. The idea that they're not investing in creating children, right? But then there's still this natural instinctive urge to leave some legacy, right? So the monks and nuns would often go and teach, and that was what Buddha did. He taught, right? And that was his legacy, these seeds of ideas. And that's very different. It's very interesting to think about that natural instinctive desire to leave a legacy, and then where does that go, and to leave a positive legacy, and the idea that you can sow seeds in the minds of others through seeds of wisdom, seeds of understanding, either understanding, normal subjects like being a teacher, or understanding, spiritual topics. And if I think about, like, I also hesitate to even use the word spirituality in these classes, because my intention at the outset was to offer something that was secular, right? And spirituality and secular kind of a little awkward. And can you teach that in business? And so if I think about what is that? What is spirituality? It's retraining our instincts. It's retraining these deeper levels of our mind. We all have these instinctive tendencies, and those instinctive tendencies can lead us to, want to compete, to attack others, to just focus on personal gain, and so forth. And so we have all of these instinctive tendencies. And the main one, even setting aside sex and children and so forth, the main one is to acquire. That's probably our deepest natural tendency, just get stuff. And in, reputation and, friends and things, and, acquiring. But the problem with that, and that, we need to acquire to some degree, right? Food, clothing, shelter at some minimum. But the problem with acquiring stuff is that again, to use a quote from Buddha, the end of collection is dispersion. The end of meeting is parting. The end of birth is death. The end of rising is falling. These four things, not in that order originally. I think the end of meeting is parting. The end of rising is falling. The end of collection is dispersion. The end of birth is death. And that it's good to know that at the beginning. Right? It's good to know that earlier before you get surprised, right? And that's fundamentally why death sucks for people, is because they were hoping to avoid it. They were kind of hoping that they wouldn't have to go through it. We've seen death, right? If you eat meat, you are eating, something that died. There's dead animals. We know, everybody in history who's ever lived prior to this time has died. We kind of intellectually we know it, but on some deep internal instinctive level, it's we're definitely hoping to avoid it. And so, because you can't avoid it, then your next option is, okay, well, what's the meaning of my life? What kind of a legacy can I leave? How can I have some beneficial impact on the world around me, the people around me? And even just collection, the end of collection is dispersion, right? So even just accumulating a lot of possessions doesn't guarantee that legacy will last. And so the reason to broach these unpopular subjects is to begin to deal with the reality of these things and look for sort of deeper solutions. There are two levels on which we can. So there are. When it comes to leaving a legacy, at that point you have to rely upon somebody other than yourself because you're gone. And so our relationship with the rest of the world, the rest of the universe is critically important. Although our normal instinctive relationship is just focusing on ourselves, at some point that ceases to be around. So then our focus needs to shift to that which is non-self, right? And this is another interpretation, another aspect of spirituality, moving beyond your one self, right? Moving beyond just this limited sense of who you are. So spirituality has this one meaning of like changing deeply inside our own instinctive habits, but it has another meaning of like getting beyond the self. It's the ultimate, which is the ultimate escape from the risk of death, is moving beyond a concern for just yourself alone. So when it comes to changing our own habits internally, one of the first habits we want to change is this habit towards anxiety and stress and worry, and that's where meditation can be useful. But there's many other habits, the habit towards being just self-centered, and our own instinctive habits get us into a lot of trouble and cause problems for ourselves. And that's why changing, just even for that, for our own sake, some working on our own habits, developing new, different habits, is beneficial for our own sake. But one of the deepest habits that we have is being self-centered itself. That's an instinctive behavior. It's not something we chose to be like. It's just instinctive. So beginning to challenge that habit naturally means we begin to take more consideration for the people around us. For example, and the first thing we need to consider is, what's the impact of our actions on the people around us? Are we benefiting the people around us? Are we harming them? And training ourselves to try to bring more and more benefit, and as opposed to just wishing to take. I think last week I quoted a guy that I interviewed in a job, interviewed for a job, and he said something that really I liked a lot and agree with, is that at the root of every action is a motivation, either to benefit, to ignore, or to exploit. Those are the three possibilities: either to benefit, to ignore, or to exploit. So we put more attention on those around us to try to think about benefiting them, as opposed to ignoring or exploiting them. So this is one level. But then there's an even deeper level, right? Which is beginning to question whether we're really separate from others at all, like beginning to question how separate are we actually from others, and what this is a practice or mindset known as equalizing self and others. And there's equalizing self and others in the eyes of the law, right? But then there's equalizing self and others in terms of our own inner experience. And one thing that can happen in meditation is you begin to begin to not coat everything about us with this sense me, right? The sense of me. This is me. I'm meditating. But just think, this is an experience, right? This is an inner sound. This is a feeling. This is a wish for happiness. It is actually just a concept that distinguishes ourselves and others. We are genetically almost identical to others. Psychologically, we all vary quite a lot, but we're fundamentally not different from others. And so developing in our heart a feeling of closeness can give us a sort of a sense of connection to others that transcends our own identity, so that we really feel like instead of thinking my pain, we just think pain. Instead of thinking my worry, we just think worry. Instead of thinking my joy, we just think joy. And this is the difference between what's called grasping at a self, holding on to this concept of a self, versus just being mindful and aware of our own mind, and then through that becoming aware really of what minds do, sort of in general, and realizing the commonality and the similarity. And that opens the door to, first of all, anyway, that opens the door to a real freedom from even this sense of self, and eventually that opens the door to us being able to ask this question about what makes our life meaningful from the point of view of a very, very different paradigm, from the point of view of a very, very different standpoint. So the assumptions that we have about the world determine what we think our options are for finding a meaningful life. Whether you are consciously trying to make your life meaningful or not, we're always unconsciously operating to try to make our life meaningful. There's always some habitual unconscious thing that we're doing that's trying to justify our existence. And so changing our mind deeply opens the opportunity for us to actually find and experience the meaning of our life in a way that is stable and even death can't get at, right? Normally death is sort of nipping at the heels of your plans and your promises. Oh, I had wanted to, and this is why the death of a child is so incredibly painful. One reason the death of a child is so incredibly painful for someone is we invest our own future and meaning and opportunity in that child, and if they die, then it brings the reality of death even closer to us. So death has a way of ruining all of our plans, but there are ways of rethinking how we exist, why we exist, what we are, that give us the opportunity to find a real meaning in our life, to retrain these internal instincts in such a way that that even death can't get at that which we have established as important and meaningful. Okay, so that's a very profound topic. Sorry. So happy to linger after class. Maybe we take a few minutes for meditation just to let this settle in. But certainly happy to discuss more if you have time and want. Okay, so just to bring all of this, to wrap all of this up, bring this to a conclusion, we can again settle into some meditation, taking a deep breath in and out just to reset our minds. On some instinctive or conscious level, or both, we are living for two purposes. We're living just to sustain this life, but we're also living to create a meaning of this life, leave some legacy. Part of our mind knows that death is inevitable. We have instinctive ways of making our life meaningful. But those are not necessarily informed by wisdom. So we develop a wish to take wisdom deep into our heart, make it instinctive, and even gradually to question that which we hold as most important, the sense of our own importance. Just shifting from thinking we ourselves are important to thinking others are most important. This alone is the deepest change we can make. our mind is always striving to make this life meaningful. It is at the root of all of our other intentions and motivations. One shift from seeing ourselves as most important to seeing others as most important can begin to change the paradigm through which we guide all of our actions, help us to find a deeper meaning in our life. And then we can conclude by thinking, even in this very, very brief time, we have changed our mind. We have strengthened mental pathways towards finding a deeper meaning in our life, towards finding peace and benefiting others. And we just take a moment to imagine what kinds of good results could unfold for ourselves and others through this change we've made to our mind. And then we can open our eyes and rise from meditation.